The hall was filled with the low hum of conversation, chairs scraping lightly against the polished floor as people settled in for the evening. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, a comforting mixture that made the place feel familiar even to newcomers. At the corner, a small stage stood with a piano, its black and white keys gleaming under the soft overhead lights. Tonight was one of those community talent events, a place where people came to show off their skills, but also a place where judgments were quietly made, and where the whispers of the audience could feel heavier than the applause. She walked in holding her music sheets close, a thin smile on her lips and a nervous energy in her chest. It was a simple request she wanted to make, just to play a piano piece she had been practicing for months. She had promised herself she would do it, and more importantly, she had promised her mother, who had always encouraged her to let the music speak for itself. Her mother had passed away a year ago, but her memory was strong, and it gave her courage. The people around her didn't know her, and she didn't know them. There were seasoned performers with polished costumes and confident postures. Some wore bright colors, others had brought their instruments, all looking as if they had been on stage many times before. She felt a tiny flutter of fear at the thought of standing there among them, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. This was not about being the best or about impressing anyone. This was about honoring a promise and sharing a piece of her heart through music. When she approached the stage, some people glanced at her and smiled politely, while others barely looked up from their phones or whispered to their friends. She could feel the faint weight of judgment pressing down, though she reminded herself that it wasn't important. She unfolded her music sheets carefully and arranged them on the piano stand. Her hands hovered over the keys, feeling their smooth surface, feeling the history of the instrument, the countless notes it had carried before her. A few people in the audience snickered quietly when they saw the simplicity of her music sheets. Some whispered comments that drifted to her ears, though she tried to focus on the piano. They didn't know her story, didn't know the countless hours she had spent practicing in a quiet room at home, didn't know the reason why she was holding her music sheets with such care. She tightened her grip on the edge of the piano bench and reminded herself that she was here for herself and for the memory of her mother. She had always loved the piano. It had been her friend during lonely evenings and her comfort during hard times. The keys were a language she understood better than words, and music was the one place where her emotions could flow freely without fear of judgment. Her mother had noticed her talent early on, seeing how she could pick out melodies just by listening to a song once, or how her fingers would find the rhythm naturally. She had encouraged her to practice, to perform, but most importantly, to enjoy the music. That love was something she carried with her now, a quiet strength that made the nervous flutter in her chest feel lighter. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the cold touch of ivory beneath her fingertips. The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment, as if it were waiting for the first note to break the silence. She could hear the faint hum of the audience settling, some whispering, some clearing their throats, and she closed her eyes briefly to center herself. She imagined her mother sitting beside her, smiling, whispering encouragements that only she could hear. That image steadied her hands and calmed her racing heart. Finally, she spoke softly to the small crowd. Her voice was quiet but steady. She asked if she could play a piece she had been practicing, a simple melody that she hoped would bring warmth to the evening. There was a pause. Some people looked puzzled, some exchanged amused glances, and a few chuckled under their breath. The simplicity of her request seemed almost laughable to them in a room full of performers who had come to show off complex and impressive talents. She could feel the heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not let it show. Instead, she smiled gently, nodded politely to the audience, and began to position her hands. Each finger felt heavy at first, tense with anticipation, but as she inhaled and exhaled slowly, a quiet confidence began to grow within her. She reminded herself that this moment was hers and hers alone, that the applause or laughter of others could not diminish the promise she intended to keep. The room, with all its whispers and doubtful glances, faded slightly from her awareness. Her focus narrowed to the piano and the music sheets before her. She felt the smooth keys under her fingers, the gentle give beneath each press, and the quiet resonance that filled the room with the first soft note. It was a simple beginning, but it was enough to set the tone for what she was about to share. Every muscle in her body relaxed slightly as she let the music guide her, letting her heart speak through the melody she had carefully prepared. Even though the audience had doubted her, she felt an inner calm settle in. She could feel the story of her life and her mother's encouragement embedded in each note. The simple request she had made was more than a performance. It was a way to honor a memory, a way to let her emotions flow, and a way to connect with others through something pure and honest. In that quiet moment, as the first notes echoed through the hall, she felt ready for whatever reaction awaited her. She was no longer just a nervous performer. She was someone sharing a piece of her soul, and nothing could take that away. The stage, the piano, the audience, and the hall all faded around her as she settled into the music. Her hands moved with growing confidence, guided by countless hours of practice and the memory of her mother's unwavering belief in her. Though the night had begun with nerves and doubt, it was shaping into a moment that held the promise of something far more beautiful, a moment where a simple request could transform into a powerful expression of heart and talent. As the first few notes resonated from the piano, there was a subtle shift in the room, though not everyone noticed it at first. The gentle melody floated softly, carrying a sense of calm and simplicity. Some people continued to whisper and nudge each other, their expressions still skeptical. They had expected a small performance, but perhaps nothing extraordinary. A few others, however, began to lean forward, listening more closely. Sensing the emotion behind the notes, the girl's hands moved carefully at first, each finger pressing the keys with precision. There was a quiet intensity in the way she played, a kind of focus that came from years of private practice, from hours spent alone with the piano in a room where only music existed. Her mind was a blank canvas, free from distractions, and the sound of the piano carried all of her feelings. Her nerves did not vanish, but they became a gentle companion, reminding her that she had worked hard and was capable of this moment. A few people in the audience snickered, thinking it was just a basic tune, something too simple to hold attention. Their whispers floated across the hall, light and careless. Some even exchanged looks that said they expected this performance to be quickly forgotten. It was a small, cruel ripple, and it could have shaken her confidence. But she reminded herself of her mother's words, "Music speaks louder than words." She let the melody guide her, her heart matching the rhythm of each note, and slowly, the mocking energy began to fade. As she continued, her fingers gained confidence and grace, moving with ease over the keys. The melody, though simple, started to sound richer, fuller, as if it carried layers that were not immediately obvious. The audience began to notice the subtle changes, the careful touches, the way she brought emotion into each chord. The whispers quieted, eyes that had been skeptical began to focus, and some faces softened. Sensing that something special was happening before them, she felt a surge of emotion as she played, remembering her mother's gentle smile and the evenings they had spent together, sharing music and stories. Her mind drifted briefly to those memories, and her fingers seemed to move almost on their own, translating her feelings into sound. The music swelled slightly, filling the hall with a gentle warmth, and a few listeners found themselves holding their breath, caught in the unexpected beauty of the performance. Even though she was still playing a relatively simple piece, there was a depth to it now, an emotion that was palpable. Each note was like a word, each pause a sentence, telling a story without using language. People who had come to judge now found themselves listening, truly listening, and the room grew quieter with every passing moment. The girl's nerves had not disappeared, but they had transformed into energy that fueled the performance, adding a raw honesty to the music. The mocking whispers faded completely as the audience's attention sharpened. Some leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the sincerity and focus she brought to the stage. The simple melody became a vehicle for a more profound expression, one that could not be ignored. She was no longer just playing notes. She was communicating feelings, memories, and a quiet strength that resonated with anyone willing to hear it. Her hands moved faster now, but not recklessly. Each movement was controlled, deliberate, and expressive. She added subtle variations, small flourishes that made the music feel alive. Even though she had not intended to impress anyone, it was a natural extension of her emotions, a reflection of the hours of practice and the love she carried for the piano. Those who were watching began to notice the skill, the care, and the authenticity, realizing that there was much more here than they had assumed. She noticed a few faces in the audience changing, softening as they felt the sincerity of her performance. The skepticism and amusement were replaced by curiosity and admiration. Some began to smile quietly, some nodded slightly, acknowledging the unexpected depth in her playing. She did not look up. She stayed focused on the piano, letting the music speak for her. But she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her message was reaching people, touching them in a way words could not. A moment came when the melody paused, a soft, intentional rest that allowed the whole to breathe. She lifted her fingers slightly from the keys, letting the silence become part of the music. The pause gave her a chance to collect herself, and in that brief instant, she sensed a shift in the energy of the room. The audience had stopped fidgeting, stopped whispering, and now they were fully present, listening and feeling every note. It was as if the music had built a bridge between her heart and theirs. The performance continued, growing richer and more expressive. Each note was chosen carefully, each chord carrying meaning beyond the sheet music. The melody, though still simple in structure, now had layers of emotion, longing, hope, love, and a quiet resilience. The girl felt herself becoming one with the piano, her emotions flowing freely through her fingers and into the whole. She felt a connection with every person listening, even those who had doubted her, and it gave her a profound sense of fulfillment. As the piece neared its end, the room was silent except for the music. She played with a gentle intensity, her fingers moving with confidence, and her heart swelling with emotion. The final notes lingered in the air, a soft echo of the feelings she had poured into the performance. When she lifted her hands from the keys, there was a brief moment of stillness, as if everyone was holding their breath, unsure whether to break the spell. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. At first it was quiet, tentative, but it grew steadily, filling the hall with warmth. Some people were clapping with admiration, some with tears in their eyes, and a few smiled knowingly, realizing they had underestimated her. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling a quiet pride and relief. Her mother would have been proud, and that thought alone made every nervous moment worthwhile. The experience left her with a deep sense of accomplishment and connection. She had faced doubt, whispers, and snickers, yet she had stayed true to herself and her music. The audience, once skeptical, had been transformed by the sincerity and beauty of her performance. The hall that had felt intimidating at first now felt like a place of warmth and shared emotion. Her simple request had become a moment of genuine impact, a reminder that authenticity and dedication could move people in unexpected ways. As she stepped off the stage, the applause still echoing behind her, she felt lighter. The nervous energy that had accompanied her into the hall was gone, replaced by a calm satisfaction and a quiet joy. People approached her, complimenting her skill and expressing how touched they had been. She thanked them softly, her smile genuine, and carried with her the knowledge that her performance had been more than notes on a page. It had been an honest expression of her heart. That night, the girl learned something profound, even in the face of doubt and ridicule. Staying true to oneself could create moments that lingered long after the music ended. As the melody continued to flow from the piano, it began to take on a life of its own. What had started as a simple tune was now evolving into something more complex, more profound. Each note seemed to carry a weight of emotion, a reflection of the hours she had spent alone with the instrument, learning to translate her thoughts and feelings into music. The audience, once skeptical and dismissive, was now leaning in, their expressions shifting from casual curiosity to quiet amazement. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, dancing lightly over the keys. She added subtle changes to the rhythm, gentle crescendos that rose and fell like waves, and small variations in timing that made the piece feel alive. The music was no longer just a song. It was a story, a conversation between her heart and the listeners. The subtle flourishes she added were natural, not forced, as if the piano itself was guiding her hands, encouraging her to express more of herself. The room was still, each person fully absorbed in the performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the music fill them completely, while others watched her hands move with fascination. The initial jeers and whispers that had greeted her simple request had vanished, replaced by an almost reverent silence. The transformation in the room was palpable, a collective acknowledgement that they were witnessing something special, something unexpected. She felt a surge of emotion as she played, a mixture of joy, nervousness, and the deep love she carried for her mother. The memory of her mother's encouragement, her gentle smiles, and her belief in her talent flowed through every note. It was as if her mother's presence was beside her, guiding her fingers, reminding her to stay true to herself and let the music speak. The thought brought a warmth to her chest, and she played with renewed energy and emotion. Her confidence grew with each passing moment. The simplicity of the piece allowed her to explore the depth of her expression. She varied the dynamics, sometimes playing softly, almost as if whispering secrets, and at other times letting the notes soar, filling the hall with their rich, resonant sound. Each movement of her hands seemed to tell a different part of the story, drawing the audience deeper into her world. As she reached the middle section of the piece, The complexity of her playing increased, though it never felt forced. Her fingers moved quickly and accurately, navigating intricate passages with ease. The audience could see the dedication in her posture, the intensity in her focus, and the joy in the subtle smiles that occasionally crossed her face. The music had become a bridge between her heart and theirs, connecting them in a way that words could never achieve. Some audience members were visibly moved, their eyes glistening with tears, their breaths caught in their chests as they felt the honesty and vulnerability of the performance. Others were smiling, nodding in appreciation, recognizing the skill and emotional depth that had been hidden behind the initial simplicity. The room was united in a shared experience, a moment where judgment and skepticism had been replaced by admiration and respect. She noticed a few people exchanging glances, as if silently acknowledging that they had underestimated her. The initial ridicule seemed distant now, a memory that had no power over the performance unfolding in front of them. She stayed focused, her gaze occasionally dropping to the keys, but mostly she let the music guide her. The melody was her voice, and in that moment, it spoke louder than any words could. The piece continued to build, not with loudness but with emotional intensity. Her fingers glided effortlessly, the notes flowing like a river, carrying the audience along with them. She added subtle pauses, letting the sound linger, allowing the listeners to absorb each moment fully. The room seemed to breathe with her, each person attuned to the rise and fall of the music, caught in the spell she was weaving. There was a moment when she played a particularly delicate sequence, one that required precision and control. Her hands moved swiftly, yet gracefully, each note clear and expressive. The audience held their breath, sensing the skill and dedication required to perform it so flawlessly. It was a testament to the countless hours she had spent practicing, the discipline and patience she had cultivated, and the love she had for the music. As the piece neared its climax, the emotional intensity reached a peak. She allowed herself to fully immerse in the performance, feeling every note and every chord with her whole being. The music seemed to flow effortlessly from her heart to the piano and into the room, filling every corner with its warmth and beauty. The audience was captivated, completely absorbed in the moment, unable to look away. Even in the final moments, she maintained a delicate balance between technical skill and emotional expression. She played each note with care, ensuring that every sound carried meaning and emotion. The melody that had begun as a simple request was now a rich tapestry of feeling, skill, and dedication, a true reflection of her heart and her talent. When the last note finally faded into silence, the hall remained still for a brief moment, as if the audience needed time to fully process what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started quietly, almost hesitantly, and grew steadily into a chorus of appreciation, admiration, and genuine amazement. Some people were clapping with tears in their eyes, some with wide smiles, and others with nods of acknowledgement, recognizing the extraordinary talent and emotion they had experienced. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and pride. The performance had surpassed even her own expectations, and the reaction of the audience filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and skepticism, yet she had remained true to herself and her music. In that moment, she felt a connection with everyone in the room, a shared understanding that went beyond words. As she stepped away from the piano, the applause continued, filling the hall with warmth and appreciation. People approached her, offering compliments, shaking her hand, and expressing how moved they had been. She thanked them softly, her smile genuine, feeling a quiet joy and satisfaction that came from knowing she had given her best, shared her heart, and honored the memory of her mother. The experience left a lasting impression, not just on the audience but on her as well. She realized the power of staying true to oneself, the importance of dedication, and the ability of music to transcend words and connect people on a deep emotional level. The simple request that had been met with jeers had transformed into a moment of genuine admiration, a turning point that would stay with her forever. As the final notes lingered in the hall, the girl remained seated at the piano for a moment, letting the silence speak as loudly as the music had. Her hands hovered just above the keys, her breathing steadying after the intensity of the performance. The audience was silent too, caught in a collective pause, as if the music had created a moment outside of time. Each person in the room felt the lingering emotion, the honesty that had flowed through every note. Slowly, the applause began, soft at first, tentative, then growing steadily into a strong, genuine appreciation. Some people were clapping while their eyes glistened with tears, touched by the raw beauty and sincerity of the performance. Others smiled broadly, nodding in acknowledgement of the skill and emotion that had been poured into the simple melody. The laughter and mocking whispers that had filled the room at the beginning were now distant memories, replaced entirely by admiration and respect. She allowed herself a small, humble smile, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her. The applause was not just for the music she had played, but for the courage she had shown in stepping up to the piano despite doubt and ridicule. She thought of her mother and imagined the pride that would have filled her eyes, the quiet encouragement that had always guided her hands. That thought made every moment of fear and nervousness worthwhile. People began to approach her, some with words of praise, others with questions about how long she had been playing, how she had learned to express so much with a simple piece. She listened quietly, answering softly and politely, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the connection that had been made. It was more than recognition. It was understanding, a shared appreciation for the honesty of her performance. A few audience members lingered near the stage, their expressions thoughtful. They had come expecting to see a simple performance and perhaps have a little entertainment. But they had witnessed something more profound. The simplicity of the piece had been deceptive, hiding the depth of skill and emotion that the girl had brought to it. The lesson was clear. Talent and passion could shine even in the most unexpected places. She packed up her music sheets slowly, savoring the moment, knowing that this was not just a performance, but a milestone in her own journey. The applause continued, fading gradually as the room returned to normal. But the warmth lingered. Conversations started anew, but now they were filled with admiration, with stories of how surprised they had been, how moved they felt, and how much respect they had gained for the quiet girl who had played the piano with all her heart. Some of the younger audience members approached her with shy smiles, asking questions about playing the piano, eager to learn. She answered kindly, encouraging them to pursue their own passions, and she realized that her performance had inspired more than just admiration. It had sparked a connection, a desire in others to reach for something beyond themselves. That thought brought a quiet joy to her, knowing that the music she loved could have such an impact. The hall had transformed from a place of skepticism and casual judgment into a space of shared emotion and respect. People spoke softly to each other, reflecting on the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. Some who had mocked her at the beginning now expressed genuine remorse for underestimating her. Others simply nodded to themselves, acknowledging the quiet courage and dedication that had led to this extraordinary moment. She felt a sense of completion, not from the applause or recognition, but from the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself and her music. Every note had carried meaning, every pause had been intentional, and every emotion had been real. In that moment, she realized that the purpose of her performance had been fulfilled. She had honored her mother, shared her heart, and connected with those who had listened with open minds and hearts. The memory of her mother's encouragement remained a guiding presence. As she stepped away from the piano, each compliment, each smile from the audience, reinforced the idea that honesty and dedication in one's craft could transcend doubt and criticism. She understood that the power of music lay not just in technical skill, but in the ability to communicate truth and emotion. And she had achieved that fully that night. As the audience began to disperse, she felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. The night had started with nervous anticipation and a simple request, but it had grown into a transformative experience for both her and those who had watched. The connections forged through her music lingered, invisible threads of shared emotion that would remain long after the applause faded. She had turned skepticism into admiration, doubt into awe, and silence into understanding. In the quiet moments after the audience left, she sat alone at the piano, reflecting on what had happened. The experience had strengthened her confidence, not just as a musician, but as a person capable of facing challenges and expressing her heart honestly. She knew that this night would remain etched in her memory, a reminder of the power of courage, dedication, and authenticity. She imagined her mother's smile again, the pride shining in her eyes, and felt a warmth that filled her completely. The music had not only honored her memory, but had also allowed her to discover a new level of connection with herself and others. Every ounce of fear, doubt, and nervousness had been transformed into a shared experience that would resonate long after the night ended. Packing up her music, she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had succeeded in a way that went beyond applause or recognition. She had shared a piece of her soul, touched hearts, and reminded everyone present that even the simplest things, when performed with honesty and passion, could create moments of profound beauty and connection. The night had become a celebration not just of skill, but of courage, authenticity, and the enduring power of music. The days after the performance were filled with a quiet sense of wonder and excitement. Word of her piano performance spread through the community, and people began to recognize her on the streets, at the market, or at school events. Some came specifically to see her play again, hoping to experience the magic of her music that had left such a strong impression. Each time she played, she remembered the night at the community hall and the emotions she had shared, and it filled her with a sense of purpose and pride. She received invitations to perform at other events, small gatherings at first, and later larger ones. Each opportunity was a new chance to connect with an audience and to express herself through her music. She never forgot the simplicity of the melody she had first chosen, and she continued to infuse every performance with the same honesty and emotion that had touched people so deeply the first time. Her music became a voice for her heart, a bridge to others, and a reminder of the courage it took to step onto that stage. The recognition brought her confidence, but it also taught her humility. She knew that every performance was not just about applause or praise, but about connecting with others, sharing emotions, and telling a story through music. She continued to practice diligently, always striving to improve, but never losing sight of the reason she played: the love for the piano, the joy of creating music, and the memory of her mother who had encouraged her every step of the way. As she continued to perform, she noticed the subtle changes in the people who listened to her music. Some were children who had never experienced live music before, wide-eyed with curiosity and wonder. Others were adults who had long forgotten the feeling of being moved by a performance, and they found themselves captivated by the sincerity and emotion in her playing. She realized that music had a universal power, capable of touching people across generations, of bridging gaps, and of creating moments that would be remembered long after the notes had faded. She also found that her own understanding of music deepened. Each time she performed, she discovered new ways to express emotion, new subtleties in timing, and dynamics that made her playing even more meaningful. She experimented with different interpretations, always staying true to the heart of the music, and she began to develop her own style, one that was gentle yet powerful, precise yet full of feeling. Her talent, once unnoticed, had blossomed, and she embraced the responsibility that came with it. Despite the growing recognition and opportunities, she remained grounded. She remembered the early days when people had jeered at her simple request, the doubt and skepticism that had surrounded her first performance. Those memories were not painful, but served as a reminder of how far she had come. They gave her strength, reminding her that authenticity and dedication could overcome doubt and judgment, and that her own belief in herself was the foundation of her success. She began to mentor younger students who showed an interest in music, sharing the lessons she had learned about patience, practice, and the importance of expressing oneself honestly through art. She encouraged them to explore their own emotions and to use music as a way to connect with others. Watching them grow and discover their own voices brought her joy and reinforced the value of the journey she had taken. From a nervous girl with a simple request to a performer who could inspire others. Through her experiences, she learned to appreciate the quiet moments as much as the applause. Practicing alone in a sunlit room, playing for herself, became as meaningful as performing in front of an audience. She understood that music was not just a skill to be admired, but a way of living, a way to explore and express the deepest parts of the human experience. Each performance, each note, was a reflection of her journey, a testament to resilience, dedication, and love. As she continued to grow as a musician, opportunities rose that she had never imagined. Invitations to larger events, collaborations with other musicians, and even the chance to record some of her pieces gave her new challenges and experiences. She approached each one with the same careful preparation and heartfelt intention that had guided her from the very beginning. Her performances remained honest and moving, and the audiences responded with admiration and respect, drawn not only to her skill, but to the sincerity and emotion in her playing. She reflected often on the night of her first community hall performance, the night that had transformed her journey. She remembered the nervous anticipation, the skeptical whispers, and the overwhelming joy she felt as the music flowed from her fingers and touched the hearts of those listening. That night had been a turning point, a moment that showed her the power of belief, courage, and the ability to stay true to oneself. It had taught her that even the simplest request, when carried out with sincerity and passion, could change lives. Her music became more than a personal passion. It became a way to honor the memory of her mother and to bring joy and inspiration to others. She continued to play with all her heart, knowing that each note had the potential to touch someone deeply, to create a memory, and to share a part of herself. She understood that recognition and applause were temporary, but the emotional impact of honest, heartfelt music could last a lifetime. Through her journey, she learned the importance of resilience. There would always be moments of doubt, criticism, and challenge, but she knew that dedication, authenticity, and love for what she did would carry her through. The jeers that once greeted her had become lessons, reminders of the strength and courage it took to pursue her passion. She had grown not only as a musician but as a person, developing patience, confidence, and a deep understanding of the power of emotion and connection. She continued to play, to inspire, and to grow. Every performance was a new opportunity to share her story, to honor her past, and to connect with those who listened. She had learned that the true measure of success was not in applause or accolades, but in the ability to move hearts, to express oneself honestly, and to embrace the journey fully. The simple request that had once been met with jeers had led to a lifetime of music, connection, and fulfillment. Looking back, she realized that the journey had been about much more than music. It had been about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to believe in oneself despite doubt. It had been about honoring promises, sharing emotion, and discovering the strength that lay within. Her music, her performances, and the connections she had made were a testament to the power of honesty, passion, and the human spirit. In every note she played, she carried the memory of that first performance, the love of her mother, and the knowledge that even the simplest expression, when sincere, could change the world around her.